You ain't seen me in a minute, but I'm back and I'm still black. I mean, I'm half black, but like, I think people know what's up with the Tan Tigress at this point. If you don't, I'm your host, Rebecca Henderson. Welcome to Off Color. Hey fam, welcome back to Off Color. It's been 4 months, and we're back. On this episode, we are catching up, just me and Janece of European descent. Pew, 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 pew. I like your weak ass air horn, Janece. I'm so happy to be back with you.
Oh, you don't call my air horn weak ass.
I know. Oh,
so
did I call it weak ass? I mean, come on. It was like pew pew pew. It was like a Star Wars gun. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't pew 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 pew. So that's fine. It's been so long. It's been since March 15th, I think, was our last episode that we did. But now we're back and we're working on recording from home, and so this episode was recorded on Friday in July. I don't even know what day it is. I mean, does anyone know what day it is?
I'm surprised you knew it was Friday.
That is legit.
I think that's only because you put it on your calendar, but
I also think on my computer I see Fry right here. It says F-R-I. Doesn't have a date, just has Fry and the time. So yeah. Anyway, so I'm so glad to be back with you in my living room. You're apparently in your closet.
Yeah.
I like it.
I'm in the closet because...
No, come out. It's okay.
I'm out. Don't worry.
I know.
I'm just saying.
Okay, just checking.
Yeah. No, the closet is nice for acoustics because of all the clothes. It's a little bit like being back in the studio because it's kind of dark and hot. It's not quite the same. But
no, I really miss it. And I'd like to give a little shout out to House of Pod though. I know they're trying to maintain and do their thing, and I still keep my membership because we use the server.
Yeah.
Which I think is good, and I'm hopeful that there will come a time when I would feel comfortable going back into the studio.
Yeah.
But right now,
during quarantine, the first couple of months of quarantine, I read this really interesting article. The summary of it was that, we're almost like that iconic movie scene where there's the person on the horse and they're running and the drawbridge is going up and, they have to jump and make it across the moat and land and before the drawbridge goes up. And we are kind of like that person on the horse, just in midair. And we're not sure if we're going to make it or not. We're not sure where we're going to land or how we're going to land. But, we're just kind of hanging out in midair right now. And one of the things that she said was that make sure that those things that you want to see on the other side of that jump are still there. So invest in the organizations and the resources and the restaurants and the businesses that you really want to be able to go to and want to have accessible after this is all over. So yeah, I've also contributed some money to House of Pod because they're doing some really amazing things, including an incubator for women of color to get their voices out there and start to decenter whiteness in the conversations that are taking place in the pod universe, I guess. So
I love that. You know what I thought of when you said we're floating in the air? You know what else floats in the air? The coronavirus, okay? COVID-19 floating in the air. That is what they've been saying that, and I feel like they've been saying it all along, that it's like living in the air, especially in enclosed spaces, right? And these droplets, it's hanging out. And my question is, can it hang out in the air in a school?
I mean, that's opening a whole can of worms. There are so many questions that I feel like are unanswered at this point.
So a lot of questions are unanswered, and I think that Off Color, I would like us to be a source of valuable information for people at this time, all around things like what organizations should we support? What businesses should we support? Like, what can we do now during this unprecedented time for us. We know you have a lot of questions about many things, including the coronavirus and how it impacts Black and brown people disproportionately. We know you have questions about race and identity, especially now during this like incredible social uprising that we're seeing.
Absolutely.
That people are calling it a sea change moment. Is it a sea change moment? I won't know until I see some change. And so far, all I'm seeing is performative gestures of renaming and writing Black Lives Matter on the street and doing those things. And everyone is talking about how it's this moment, but I'm not so sure personally. So that's my feeling on it. And I'm sure people have lots of different opinions, and we're going to be talking about that.
We do want to bring some experts on, right? And talk some
about
some of these questions.
Not experts.
No.
So anyone listening right now,
opinions.
Yeah, these are just our little wee thoughts, and it is stuff that we're kind of kicking off into our new season. I guess this is I don't know. Is this a new season?
Girl, it feels like the last 3 months have been an entire year. So yeah.
I know. So yes.
It's
okay.
A new
so
season.
Off Color season 4, motherfuckers. Woo! It's been 4 years. It is true though. We started in 2016.
So this is 2020 AC, right? There was
AC.
2020 BC. This is 2020 AC.
Yeah.
And 2020 AC, I have high hopes for 2020 AC. It's been rough, but I see some things coming out of this. People adapting, things are changing.
All right. Well, I feel like I totally disagree with you. And I just don't know how people are making it in this world the way it is right now. Like, I don't know how people are handling it.
It helps if you don't have kids, which I don't have any kids, so it's been a little bit like a extended vacation in some aspects for me and my partner. My partner is still working full time and not making as much money as we were, but yeah, I mean, luckily we had some savings set aside, but most people do not. I just, It breaks my heart thinking about people who were already living paycheck to paycheck, and have kids at home and are having to balance all of these new things and their lives completely turned upside down. So I don't know. I hope that this podcast can start to be a little bit of a ray of light into some of those people's existences right now, like just to make them feel heard and seen, and also help get some information to them that they can relate to, local information, but also global information as far as the pandemic is concerned. And
yeah, because it's global, and people keep acting like they don't know what a global pandemic is.
Yeah, I know. They keep blaming it on the Democrats. They blame it on the deep state. They blame it on... I'm like, guys, this is literally happening in every country. This is the first moment in history where I think all of humanity is simultaneously experiencing the same crisis.
I mean, in 1918, the Spanish flu.
Okay, so I think what makes this different, though, than then is we have instantaneous information crossing the globe at all times. We are tracking every single infection to the day, if not to the hour, every single death in real time. Every person on the planet, for the most part, has access to that kind of information. That creates an extraordinary amount of anxiety.
Yeah. I mean, I don't disagree with you, because there's something, people are like, oh, it's worse than it's ever been in the world, like in general. And it's not. This is like the safest time to be alive in human history. Even though it feels like it's not, it really is. A lot of it does have to do with like hygiene and water and those things. But, people blame it in some ways on like the 24-hour news cycle, right? So we're watching it, we're seeing it all the time. That's why we feel like things are worse, I think, because even if things were happening all the time before, we just watched the news once or twice a day, and we read the newspaper, and that was kind of it, right? But now we're just inundated constantly, and I can't put my phone down. I can't stop scrolling. I want to tell you about a really stressful thing that just happened to me.
Okay.
I had to go take my kid to the doctor to check because he's been peeing like crazy, and it was like freaking us out, you know. And I suspect that it's psychological. It is. There's nothing wrong with him physically. But being in that doctor's office, like being in the room, then the nurse was coughing. She was like, and I was like, bitch, are you sick? And she was like, no, I have seasonal allergies.
Oh my gosh.
And it was so stressful. And like, we were there for like an hour, and then we came home and took a shower and put the clothes in the laundry and did all that. But I'm definitely like, I was going to go get a drink. Is that weird?
No, get a drink.
I need a drink. Like, my nerves are bad.
Right.
And I feel like a little nip of whiskey wouldn't hurt me.
Go get yourself a little calming
I'm just
remedy,
gonna get
okay?
a little nip.
Get back into
that's
it,
still recording.
Welcome to Intermission, music by Rebecca Henderson.
I like bourbon. I like treats. I like a little whiskey at noon. That might seem crazy to you, but what can you do? She likes her little booze. This is just a good nip. That it won't kill me. It won't kill me. It won't make me stronger. That's right. Feeling strong in the night. Moonshine and happy days.
Yeah, that's quite a nip.
Oh my God, that's so good. It tastes so good when it touches your lips, you know what I mean? Just a little nip. Okay. So a couple things that have been happening that I wanted to catch you up on with the old Rebecca Tan Tigress situation. I have been homeschooling my child, who is going to be 5. My husband is still working full time, but he works down in the basement. Luckily, he doesn't have to go into the office because he's immunocompromised and they didn't want, And so he's home.
He's
and it
doing
sounds
some
good.
Cool stuff. He's like launching rockets and shit.
No, they're going to Mars in like 2 weeks for real. It's like totally crazy. But that's just what I've been doing. He's been working, but it's been really challenging for me emotionally and also creatively to try to like finish my work. And that was something we had talked about, art in the time of the Rona. People are creating, people are doing things, and some people are not. And what can we do safely? And I believe that recording this podcast is something we can do safely, as long as I don't get too drunk.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like some additional financial resources would be really helpful. But like in your situation, extra money is not going to solve the challenges that you have in particular.
I mean, it'll help me finish my documentary.
Well, there's that. So donate to the documentary.
We do have a documentary. I have a Fundly. That Fundly is not for people who have already given me money. I wish you people who love me and support me, I really appreciate that, and I will allow you to give me money. Janece of European descent. However, I don't want people who've already given me money to give me more money. Like, I want people who I kind of feel like owe me money to give me money. Now, what does that mean, owe me? I provide a service to my neighbors in alerting them to how racist they are. They didn't like that service for many years, but now they're kind of into it. And I feel like I would like to be compensated, and in return for that compensation, I will finish this incredible film that will help people understand systemic racism, politics, like so many things. It's beautiful production. I'm really proud of the work that we've done. We're so close, but we got to finish it. The last part of a film is always the most costly. So extra money would not help me. Yes. And that's the worst part, because the thing that we really truly need is we need Kingston to be able, that's my son, Kingston, we need him to be able to play with other children and get his socialization. And he cannot do that because we are concerned about the coronavirus.
So let's open the schools.
No, I will not. And can I just tell you something? Seriously, I got so mad. I actually had to call my school board member because I was like, listen, what are we doing? Like, have you really thought this all the way through? And so science aside, I can't believe I just said that, but science, like, I guess I can't put science aside, but I'm saying, like, if you know that students have a weapon on them, right? What do we do? What happens to them? Now, according to what I believe is federal law, right? If you try to cough on someone now, that is a crime.
Yeah.
Is it not? I'm pretty sure it's a crime.
I'm pretty sure it's at least assault.
Yeah. And I think that what we've seen on the interwebs is grown people coughing on other people as a weapon. We are seeing that, and then these teachers are in the building with students. Now, I'm not saying the kids are a bunch of murderous, like, weaponized coronavirus like thing, but I'm just saying, if these children's parents who are pushing for them to go back to school, do you know that my school board member told me that people are sending her messages like, I know where you live, and if my kids don't go back to school, if you don't open up the school, I'm going to be really mad. Like, what kind of children are they raising is my question. I just think that seems like a thing to think about. Like, what kind of risk are we putting our teachers at and other students?
Yeah, well, okay, so you said, science aside, but also not necessarily science aside. It is, at this point, the numbers are showing it's, for the most part, a 99% quote-unquote recovery rate. We don't know what the long-term health impacts are and that kind of thing. Things we still don't understand about this virus. But let's just say a teacher does get sick, but not sick enough to go to the hospital. They still have to take time off. They still have to quarantine. Does that come out of their paid time off? Is that part of Family Medical Leave Act? Does their entire class have to quarantine? Does their class's families have to quarantine? It's not just necessarily about if teachers are going to get sick. They will get sick. Are you going to be able to find a substitute teacher for that class? It's already hard enough to find substitute teachers, let alone during a pandemic. So if the class doesn't have a teacher, then are they required to teach over Zoom while they're sick? We have no answers to any of these questions, and that's what the teachers are upset about. In addition to the fact that they are being put in danger for the quote-unquote economy, for the convenience of parents, there's all these unanswered questions that there's no plan for. There's zero leadership going on in these situations right now.
No, I mean, Janece, you're asking all of the right questions. And I am a parent that would give anything to have my kid going back to school. Anything, but I'm not going to give his life or my husband's life or my life for that. Let's be real, man. Everyone's like, the kids' mental health, the trauma. Like, guess what? Yeah, too late. They're all traumatized from this already.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but come on, Like, and they're resilient. This will be part of their, their grit, their story, their life. My dad was born during the Great Depression, so I know how that impacted him, and in turn, us, as his children. I don't think it's worth it. And so that's how we balanced it. And whenever I'm having sort of like my own crisis where I'm like, we should just give up, we shouldn't even do this anymore, I'm like, we should just let's all just go out. Maybe these Republicans are right. Like, it's inevitable. Let's just give up. And my husband is always like, no. The point is to not get the coronavirus, ultimately. Like, we don't want to get it.
Is it inevitable, though? I guess that's one of the things I've been asked and have asked myself. Is this one of those viruses that we are just going to have to live with long term? Yeah. It's like, oh, get your flu shot, get your shingles shot, get your coronavirus shot. But by then, it won't be a death sentence to a certain extent for those vulnerable groups.
But so here's my concern. It's like every day.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We're learning something new about this virus, which is science. Things change, move. Mm-hmm. That's part of it, right? And so we kind of have to operate with the information that we have, but it's changing all the time. And so that's what it feels like to me.
Mm-hmm. There is a lot of information coming at us, and it's changing. And especially with social media, there are articles from months ago still being shared, despite that information no longer being accurate. I mean, that's not necessarily malicious intent misinformation. That's just us not necessarily being able to recognize that science and the world has moved on from that idea, right? And social media isn't built to weed out that old information that is no longer relevant. I accidentally commented on a friend's post from 9 years ago because they had, or someone else had liked it, and then they commented like, oh, wasn't this a funny moment? And I didn't realize they were talking about like years ago. I thought they meant like last week or a couple of days ago or something. But the algorithm put something from 9 years ago back into my feed. I mean, let alone an article from a couple of months ago saying things about like how the virus actually spreads or doesn't. Like, should we actually be disinfecting every single thing that comes into our house? Or is it really been proven that it's not transferred via touch unless somebody literally licks something and then you touch it and you immediately touch your eye or lick your fingers or whatever? What is the most up-to-date information, and how do we reliably get that?
So I am concerned that everyone is going to die. And I know everyone dies eventually, obviously.
Yeah.
But I just think just the thought of not being able to raise my kid because I'm dead makes me feel sad, even though I do not enjoy being a stay-at-home mom at all.
Yeah, and I can understand that. I actually had a really interesting conversation with someone the other day. She is in Florida right now, and has a completely different perspective on what's going on down there, which is fascinating and a completely different subject. But we were talking about medical intervention, right? The person that I was having this conversation with, she thinks that vaccines are not allowing our body to do what it should naturally be able to do, right? Is develop an immunity to something. Herd immunity, it's not necessary, and that eventually we will develop herd immunity. That is a whole other scientific conversation, right? You don't even have to go down the rabbit hole of whether vaccines are safe or effective, which they are. I am not saying they are not. The point was, if you can save somebody's life by using a simple antibiotic, would you do it? If you can save somebody's life by wearing a mask, would you do it? If you could save somebody's life by developing a drug that costs millions of dollars, would you do it? If you could save your own life or someone else's life by pumping chemicals into them like chemotherapy does, would you do it? Despite all the terrible side effects. So part of that conversation is, where is the line of acceptable medical intervention versus letting nature run its course and letting the body do what it's supposed to do? And if you die, oh, sorry.
And that's a way of living. I think about that. You know, my father-in-law passed away in November, and he grew up in Jamaica. And one of the things that he said to me in conversation was that, you know, life is cheap there in some ways, you know, because people die all the time, and of things that maybe they wouldn't necessarily die of here in the United States. Like, if that's how we want to live, that's okay, I guess. I want to live, so I'm like not into that. But that's because my life is pretty fun in general. So I don't know. Maybe it does depend on you, how you value life, or maybe it depends on your religious beliefs, or maybe, you know, like, I don't know.
But who makes that decision as far as the government is concerned? You know, a mask mandate, should that be influenced by religious opinion, spiritual opinion?
No, motherfucker. Everyone should just put on a goddamn motherfucking mask. That's what I'm trying to tell people.
That's what I'm saying,
because
why?
It's like, it's because it's fucking common sense. On top of it being like, listen, let me tell you about life, okay? Uh-oh, this whiskey kicking in. Here it comes. Here she comes.
All right.
She's back. But listen, seriously. And I forgot. Help!
Line.
Okay.
You said wearing a mask is common sense. That's
to me, it's common sense. And the reason that I have this perspective, I believe, is because I lived in Japan. And in Japan, if you are sick or you have a cold or something, right? Because they have an insane work ethic, which I totally disapprove of, but they would go to work and they would wear a mask because we know, based on regular germs, not the coronavirus, that if you sneeze on someone, they're probably going to get sick. They're going to catch your cold, right? We know if we cough, shit is flying out of our mouths. So to me, if you know that it helps prevent sicknesses, will it prevent the coronavirus? Maybe. You know, we had a major unplanned experiment on the masks in the form of the social uprising around George Floyd's murder. Okay, so all over the country, people were protesting. Most of the protesters, according to the data that I have observed and seen and heard from media, most of them were wearing masks. And so even though they were close to each other, they were outside with masks on, and we did not see some huge uptick from those protests. So,
and there were thousands of people there.
Thousands. Did you see that there's a one of LA where you can just see the street, just a wave of people. Now, my husband and I did not go. We didn't participate. We still won't gather. We won't gather with anyone. We are not interested in doing that, okay? Because we're nervous. We wouldn't do that. However, for me as a pretty active person, I have been really, I feel sad that I can't be at those protests. And I also feel guilty as well. Like, I'm not willing to put my life on the line for liberation. And for me, that was kind of the hardest pill for me to swallow this entire pandemic, is questioning that. So this is sort of the heart, I think, of the conversation I wanted to talk about with you today, Janece, is that I feel like I'm not dedicated to the movement enough because I wasn't willing to go to a protest. I'm willing to go to a protest and get my head smashed in and do those things, but I wasn't willing to get my head smashed in and possibly get the coronavirus. That was too much for me.
Why are those two things different? The threat of physical violence versus the threat to your health. Why are those things different?
My point is that I have protested. I have been in situations before where I felt afraid, I think there was a protest at the concentration camp, the ICE detention center that's very close to where I live, where we had, where it started taking on sort of a destructive moment. There was a little tiny fire and they ran the flags up the flagpole, and it wasn't really that big a deal in my opinion, but I also saw snipers getting up onto the roof, and I saw the police ready to potentially hurt us and kill us. And that was scary for me, but that felt like a risk I could take. That was an acceptable level of risk for me personally. Coronavirus, because of my husband and my child, is not an acceptable level of risk for me. So I guess that's the difference. If I were not married and had a child, yes, I would have been.
I don't think that makes you any less of an activist.
I'm not an activist. I hate when people say that.
You are an activist.
I'm not. I'm active sometimes. I be showing up, but I'm not a real activist.
All right.
Real activists be getting shit done. I just be drinking my whiskey at the crib.
Hold on. Let's talk about this for a second. So, I would not be where I am at in my journey towards anti-racism if it were not for you and the ideas that you have been willing to discuss with me in an open way, and the people and the conversations that you have brought into my life. During the quarantine, I finished reading Mark Charles's book, which is bomb AF, by the way. It's called Unsettling Truths, and it takes us all the way, way, way back to the origins of racism and systemic racism, and that's a whole other podcast that I would love to discuss with Mark Charles. We are going to have him on again.
You know what? We should have him on again as soon as possible just to talk about the book.
Yeah.
Just the book.
I wish I had read the book before we talked to him last time, but yeah, it was phenomenal. And I wouldn't have known anything about that as a resource if it weren't for the conversations that we had. So you say you're not active, you say you're not doing anything for the movement, but you've changed at least one person's mind and one person's life with how you speak and what you speak about and the information that you share. So I want to thank you for that. And also, I don't think I'm the only one. So hell yeah, you're an activist. And you don't have to be out in these streets causing a commotion in order to be an activist.
How about you call me, I got a new term. How about an activator? It's like a curl situation. Like, I feel like sometimes I do activate people because of something I say. That's true. And I think sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. Girl, this better be in the episode because I'm about to cry.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that. Okay, fine. Just call me activator.
All right.
Oh, wait, what about activate her? Like, I'm gonna activate her.
Smash the patriarchy. Yeah. All right. So you're an activator. That's incredible. Honestly, the ability to influence people is an essential part of activism and movements and change. So, yeah, you don't need to be out in the streets to be an activator, to be part of activism. You are acting in other ways. You're having conversations with people. You're sharing resources. You are encouraging people to do the work, as they say.
Speaking of doing the work, I am currently working on a little project with former U.S. Senate candidate Stephanie Rose Spalding, and she has been a guest on our show. She has started a pledge for truth and conciliation. Like, that was the first time I'd heard it was from Mark Charles, right? Because reconciliation implies that there was harmony, which there was not. And so she has started this pledge, and I think it is worthwhile to kind of take that anti-racist pledge and to be thinking about it for everyone, not just white people, right? Like, we have to start telling the truth about the history of the country. And you mentioned Mark Charles's book, Unsettling Truths. It is so challenging, I think, to learn those things. I always knew that my family owned slaves. My white side of the family had slaves. But I was reading a biography of Jane Jacobs, who's my great aunt, and just kind of I had never seen the information presented before like that. It said that my great-great-grandfather owned 12 slaves, big women that he was planning to breed. Knowing that is really painful for me in some ways. But it's also what you got to deal with, man. It's like, it feels almost unfair to me because it's like my great-great-grandfather on my other side was born into slavery. And my father's family is nowhere near the level of generational wealth that my mother's family was at, right? So I benefit from that. Of course I benefit from the slavery and genocide because I live on this land. What do we do with that information going forward? And I quote my favorite anti-vaxxer, who I don't like her anti-vaxxing policies, but I love this thing that she said that I will say I'll say it my whole life. It's not my responsibility to carry forward the shame of my ancestors, but it is I'm their atonement, right? And so that speaks to this activator part, the things that I do. I do this kind of work and I push people like this because we'll never be able to move forward unless we have a rebeckoning. It's a rebeckoning. No, but I feel like this is a whole other topic that we'll get into more deeply. But the idea that like mixed race babies are saving the world. We're not saving the world, but some of us want to. Off Color Podcast is a Tan Tigress production Produced and edited by Janece Knoxco. Music is created by James Meekum. And me. Hey, if you like this work and you want to support Tan Tigress Productions, feel free to join our Patreon or support us on social media. And thanks.
That was good. You're getting there.
Bitch, that is good. Just use that.